and I'm super excited to talk about horses in general today. Now, I did not, I did, I wonder if I even saw a horse in person as a kid. I probably did at a fair or something, but I knew zero about horses. But my daughter, and I think we talked about this before, my daughter started riding, I don't know, maybe age 10 or so, if I had to guess, and took riding lessons all the way up until 18 and competed just a little bit in a couple local things, didn't go on to ride in college or anything like that, but she just loved it, and I actually think it made a big difference for her. So, that being said, let's start with the basics. What is equine therapy? What does this even mean?
So equine therapy is a big umbrella, and there are many different modalities within it. So it could be either done on horseback riding that works on cognitive skills, or it could be doing groundwork, which is where the equine assisted psychotherapy that I do, the majority of that is done within the arena. So it doesn't require, I think, oftentimes when people are interested, oh, I couldn't ride a horse. I could
Mhm.
never do. Don't worry about it. I work with people all the time that have had no experience or not so good experiences with animals, and this is the most healing experience that you can have. So in equine therapy, the horse serves as a co-therapist. And horses are just these beautiful, sentient, magical beings that are so intuitive. And they don't know how to wear masks like we do. They don't have these shells of protection that we develop, that our psyche develops out of protections. So, for a horse to survive in the wild, they need to be hyper vigilant in order for survival. And therefore, when we're working with a horse, if we're saying one thing, but we're feeling something differently,
Mm.
a horse will recognize that and they won't connect with us. They might submit to us, but like in any relationship, a relationship that has respect doesn't have this submissiveness. So it's really a beautiful experience that's so much different than any other type of therapy modality that I've discovered, because you're working with the horse as your co-therapist and they're always reacting to what you're feeling internally. So you can't fake it with them.
Yeah. Something that struck me as you were saying that is that I think we also know, of course, that dogs and some other animals, well, cats even, are very in tune with what's going on inside of us and can really read that. But you said survive in the wild, and I was thinking to myself, well, gosh, horses still do that. And I'm not sure dogs and well, maybe cats, but they're quite a bit removed from that now, but horses really still do that. And so that's a great point that they really, really know how to be vigilant and how to survive.
Absolutely. And through that, when we're in partnership with a horse, it requires that we're 100% present in their presence. And what's also interesting is that a horse's brain and a human's brain that's had post traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, are very similar.
Mm.
So the resonance that you can find with a horse and their ability to attune to you and understand you is something that you really have to experience. I could talk about it all day long and I love doing so. Yet when you experience it, and I'm sure maybe you've seen these glimpses with your daughter, it's so profound.
There really is a communication that happens, and yes, I've definitely seen that. I wouldn't really necessarily have the words to describe it, but I've seen that. So, if people aren't in this type of therapy getting on the horse and riding the horse, then what would it look like? What kinds of things are they doing?
So it really depends on the clinic, the group that I'm running, but it could be anything from leadership skills. I've taken teams and organizations through building nonverbal communication, building trust, understanding consent. Is the horse consenting to what we're requesting? Do they want to put the halter on? Now somebody might be thinking, how can a horse tell you that they're okay with putting the halter on? But they can tell you through nonverbal communication, and that's what we teach. And these practices that I teach with horses can be used with other animals. I use it with my dog, I've used it with other people's dogs. And then, of course, everything that we work on in the arena is applicable to our relationships from human to human. So really this therapeutic process with the horse serving as your co-therapist allows us to see what's happening internally for us with all our different aspects of self, and it allows us to set aside those protective parts and show up authentically. And
Hmm.
through that could be very scary, to show up vulnerably and authentically and say how you're actually feeling in the inside. And yet, when people do it, it is amazing the breakthroughs that they have with the horse, with other people within the workshop. And then what happens when they leave the arena and they bring that back into their relationships and day to day life.
That's interesting. And I remember you saying that even because these are group workshops, correct? So
Yes.
even if you're not standing there with the horse, you're maybe watching on the side, you're still learning, you're still getting something out of it.
Absolutely. So much happens within that observation of you seeing the nuances once I begin teaching and demonstrating these techniques. So you learn as much in observation as you do when you're actually in communication with the horse.
Really fascinating. Really fascinating. And I think up to now, really the only type of therapy work I knew of with horses was maybe for kids who I don't know if it was some sort of developmental delay or various issues like that. I know there are programs that I've seen that do that as well.
Absolutely. And those programs are amazing. That's how I started out my journey after ending my amateur equestrian career and not taking it to the next level. I had read about equine therapy, and I said to myself, "Oh, I would love to volunteer for an organization like that if I ever get the time." And I began doing that, and I absolutely loved it. So it was working with children and adults with disabilities, working with veterans with PTSD,
Mhm.
and oh gosh, the transformation I would see week to week for some children being nonverbal on the spectrum, and then only talking 30 minutes when they were in their lessons once a week. So
Wow.
it's really just, I would say every week when I was teaching that my riders and the horses taught me then more to me than I could ever teach them, and I would just walk away from each lesson thinking, wow, these animals just provide us so much.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so many years of doing that, I eventually became a certified instructor with that, and absolutely loved it. And then I landed upon the equine assisted psychotherapy, and so all of those experiences inform what I'm doing now and how I work with clients in different populations.
Right. I love it. Really fascinating. Okay, so then you have mentioned we've talked a little bit about kids who might have various concerns and disabilities, and we've talked about people who are struggling with PTSD, veterans. And what about who else might this be good for? I guess is really my question. What might somebody gain from this if they're kind of just your typical office worker and they're curious?
Yeah, and the groups that I work with now are exactly that. I think most people find me because they want to understand themselves better. Perhaps they're going through relational issues, suffering with anxiety or depression. And so it's really for anyone who wants to understand themselves and strengthen and deepen their relationships around them. And so a lot of it could be, couples will come in and families working on that. Like I said, it could be organizations, teamwork, really strengthening the bonds within the workplace. Um, yeah.
So really, it could be a lot of different things. Interesting. Well, so let's say, or actually, instead of me making something up, do you have kind of a story of a particular person or group that it really helped that kind of sticks out to you?
Gosh, so many. Um, so yes, I would say I've done some work with medical students,
Hmm.
and their reason for doing the equine therapy was to learn nonverbal communication to be a better doctor to their patients. If you think about doctors, they have such little time, they're
Mm.
reduced to such little time in order to make a connection with the patient. And how in 15 or 30 minutes, whatever time they're given, can they begin to pick up on and attune to what their patient is feeling and be able to still have that scientific knowledge that is so needed and that discernment within the medical field, but
Mhm.
also lead with compassion and find a sense of connection with the person that's sitting in front of them. And so that was has been really beautiful to see
Yeah.
the doctors, emerging and in their careers, and seeing that they have that toolbox as a new doctor walking out there. And then also I would say, with veterans, and just seeing the profound healing that can happen in just being in leadership and partnership with these horses. Yeah.
Amazing. So what is it, and you've kind of answered this, but I'm going to ask it anyway and we'll see what happens. What is it that's different about this type of therapy versus something else? And why does that make a difference or why does that matter?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think oftentimes therapy gets a really bad rap. People would say, "Oh, I went to therapy and all we did was talk and nothing really came out of it," or "I spent, X amount of years here." And there's so many factors that go into having a positive therapeutic experience. And not every type of modality out there is for everyone because we're such unique individuals. What I love about equine therapy, I think it serves as a beautiful adjunct to perhaps talk therapy or some other modalities out there, is that it's experiential. As I
Mm,
mentioned before, it forces you to be in your body, which can be very difficult if you've experienced trauma in your life. Um, so it puts you in your body, it puts you in the present moment. And then uniquely, I really can't off the top of my head think of another form of therapy where you have a co-therapist and a therapist in the arena. So as a
true.
therapist, therapists are always lending their nervous system to their clients. They're holding that safety and security so that a client can feel safe enough to experience all of their emotions. Yet oftentimes when we're talking about our experiences, it could stunt us at times, and that's why forms of somatic therapy and experiential therapy can be so beneficial. And that's what I love about working with the horses, because the horses aren't judging you. The horses are really there to attune and understand you. And it's just the most beautiful moment when someone has that connection with the horse, and whatever emotional release they have, be it, tears, and the horse just really responds to that. And so they've built safety in relationship with the horse. And perhaps if they don't feel safe in relationships with other humans, this gives them an entry into that safety. It's safe to request something and for that request to be met. So you're asking for connection, as we so often do in relationships, and sometimes that connection's not met, and that rejection can really impact us to the point where we might not want to put ourselves out there for risk of rejection again. And yes, when people come into the arena and they're not being honest with their emotions, the horse will reject them because they only accept honesty. Yet when I walk them through it and they request again through that authentic self expression, 10 times out of 10, every single time the horse responds. And that is the healing moment.
Wow. Wow. I can picture it. That's very cool. And then I would imagine that someone can then go home or wherever and hold on to that feeling and that feeling of safety, that here's how this went and it was okay, right?
Absolutely, because you experience, it was a felt experience as opposed to perhaps intellectualizing it. How often do we say oh, I like the idea of that and I'm going to do it. I know all the steps of what I need to do behaviorally. Okay, and I'm going to take these action steps when I leave my session and I'm going to go out into the world and do it, and our protective parts can come in and protect us from taking those action steps. Yet through the work that we do in these workshops, we're making those parts feel safe enough to step aside. We're showing that this animal will respond to us through being truthful and through
Mm.
being vulnerable. And that alone is so healing that we can begin to take those risks because that lived experience won't leave our body. Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing.
Even for myself as a facilitator, I've been doing this work for years, and every single time I lead a workshop and I'm working through other people's relational issues, or if it's in the workplace, but it's all relational at the end of the day. So relational issues is really
Hmm.
down to. And I'll always have an aha moment for myself as I'm facilitating. Ooh, am I wearing a mask in this area of my life? And I'll leave the session with that much more awareness of how I could perhaps look into that and show up more authentically.
Really, really interesting. I feel like this is kind of 10xing. I was at a conference last week and they brought in puppies and they had a little puppy area just in the middle of the conference where you could go play with the puppies if you wanted to. I feel like we're now taking this and we're kind of exploding it much bigger, but maybe sort of same base principle that the way we communicate with animals is bringing out certain feelings or making us understand how we're feeling.
Absolutely helping us understand. I always say that animals are teaching us where we're going, which is to their level of attunement, awareness, enlightenment, if you will. And they have so much to teach us if we're willing to put our own egos aside and truly listen. And I even think about a horse, like picking up their hoof to pick their hoof. They're not going to give you their leg unless they feel a sense of safety and respect from you. And again, you can dominate them into submission, but they'll never respect you. And you can really see when an animal, and I'm sure you've seen it if with your own animals, if you have them, or just with
Mhm.
friends, you can see if someone's truly connected to their animal or if their animal is in fear of them. So they're
Yeah.
just responding to that dominance and fear. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe it helps us see that between each other too. That's interesting.
Mhm.
Hmm. Okay, well, I'm guessing that the question that people are asking themselves then is, okay, well, actually, listeners, maybe some of you are in Long Island or New York City and you can find Courtney. But let's say people are all over the place and they're thinking, well, this sounds interesting for my office or my group or my family or whatever. So how could they find something like this?
Certainly, they can research equine assisted therapy, equine assisted learning. It's definitely more popular in certain areas of the country than it is in others. So depending where you live, you might find quite a few places. I think it's more popular to find places that work with equine therapy in terms of disabilities versus the psychotherapy aspect.
Hmm.
That tends to be a little bit harder to find and more unique. But I would do a simple search on equine assisted therapy or learning and see what comes up.
Perfect. Perfect. I love that. And of course, the thing about horses, and we used to drive because we live in a pretty urban environment. We used to drive a ways to get to the horse area of Virginia. The thing with horses is they're not going to be found in every area either, right? So there's a little limit there.
Although you would be surprised, I live in Manhattan and I hold these workshops only 40 minutes outside of New York City on the North Shore of Long Island. So it's actually very convenient to get to. And there are oftentimes, organizations that are located close to the city. Of course, you're going to find a lot more in the country. And Virginia is definitely horse country. So
Virginia is horse country. Yeah.
Virginia, all those, yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. But it's everywhere. It's everywhere. You're right. So, searching equine assisted therapy or equine assisted learning, that's great advice. And now, what if people are interested in connecting with you and learning more?
They can visit my website, which is CourtneyClifford.com. They can connect with me on Instagram, Courtney M. Clifford. And yeah, I offer one-on-one virtual sessions. I'm also available to travel if people want me to host a workshop near them, if they have horses or if they ride somewhere. I'm always willing to collaborate in that way. And then I hold my sessions out on Long Island.
Perfect. Perfect. And what an interesting thing if someone has a horse and wants to do something. Love it. Well, listeners, if you are an animal lover like me, it seems like this is something that is worth taking a look at. And to me, it sounds like even if I'm not feeling like I have a relationship issue or some other issue, this would still be pretty enlightening and something worth experiencing.
Yeah, it gives you a window into your own internal world. And the more we can understand our own feelings and all these different parts and aspects of self, it just leaves for a smoother experience out in the world that we're living in, which can be very complex
Mhm.
and overwhelming. And, horses, I feel, animals bring us back to our true nature, that innate sense of self, highest self, if you'd like to call it that, that really is our guiding compass. And essentially, anyone who comes to work with me, whether it's individuals or couples or teams, they're looking for connection. That's what they're looking for. How can I better connect? How can I better connect to my own creativity? How can I better connect as a CEO to make sure that I'm understanding my team and my clients? How can I better connect as a partner or as a parent? And this is a window into that, and horses make it available to us.
I love that. And I find in coaching that one of the things people really struggle with, which is related exactly to what you're saying, is understanding what their emotional state is at any given point. Because if I say, well, how are you feeling? Then usually I hear, well, a whole sentence about something they're thinking about. But to identify an emotion is sometimes hard. I don't know why that is, but it's challenging. And so maybe this helps with that.
I think we're not taught. I know that when I first went to coaching school, I had to take up the feelings wheel because
Yes.
fine was a feeling. I didn't know fine wasn't a feeling. I honestly didn't know that. And then through that experience of having language around it, it helped me to understand, okay, and where did these feelings show up in my body? And then how
Mhm.
did these feelings inform, my behavior that that I'm exhibiting. So horses are great because they will respond to what you're feeling.
Mm.
And that's a partnership, whether you're riding the horse or you're leading the horse around the ring. Sometimes we'll set up obstacle courses for the groups to create. And it creates a lot of teamwork and some challenges around how to get the horse to go around these obstacles. It's so simple, and they'll see someone else doing it. They'll go, but the horse just did it for this person. How come? Well, what energy are you holding as you're making this request? They're always responding to energy. Do they believe that you're leading them, or do they feel? I see this a lot in the arena. Is people will make a request, yet they're really looking to the horse. And so the horse, and you think about that in life, we ask for something, yet if we're not sure about it, how is the other person supposed to trust what we are asking for? And when you're asking for one thing, but you're unsure, then that makes the other person doubt you because you're doubting yourself. And a horse is the same way. And I'm sure your daughter would be able to share with you, her experiences. You can't get around the jump course if you're not looking where you're going and that you're really sure that you want to go over that jump. If you hesitate in that thought, 9 times out of 10, you'll be out of the saddle. So
Yes.
really requires such presence, and it's confidence building.
Really, really fascinating. Really fascinating. Okay, well, I think we're all ready to go and try this for sure. And, it's interesting because I did an episode also on meditation. And one of the things that we really talked a lot about, because I think meditation is one of those things that sounds very intimidating and doesn't have to be. But one of the things we talked about was it's just such a powerful thing to be present, which is what you're saying as well, and to just be right where you are right now, feeling what you're feeling. And to me, it sounds like that this would help people to do exactly that as well.
And I think, I teach meditation as well. And I was one of those people that couldn't meditate, typical neurotic New Yorker. I'd sit there and I would be thinking of all these different things. And then I discovered breath work. And then when I began bringing that into the arena as a rider, as an instructor, wow, what a difference it made. And again, your first question, if I had had that as a rider when I was at my first horse shows, then I wouldn't have been having, anxiety attacks right before I got out.
Wow.
People would always say, you win the blue ribbon. Why are you having an anxiety attack? Everything that goes up until that point. And now I can teach other people how to self-regulate, and the horse is able to regulate you as well because you have this 1,500-pound animal, and they are able to have this regulation with you and this coherence that happens that's absolutely astounding when you really can match your breath to the horse's breath, your heartbeat to their heartbeat. it's
Wow.
it's special.
It definitely sounds like it.
And the other
Wow.
thing about horses as well is they have, just riding them, bilateral stimulation. And bilateral stimulation is something that can be used in therapy, such as trauma therapy, like EMDR.
Mhm.
Perhaps like people have seen like the tapping, the butterfly tapping. And so you could be thinking of, recalling a very difficult experience, and that could be desensitized through the bilateral stimulation. So just the act of being with the horse and that bilateral stimulation, that alone is so calming and so healing.
Wow. Fascinating. Fascinating. Well, I'm so glad to be able to chat with you about this because it really is something that as soon as we initially talked, I was thinking, yeah, I know people are going to find this interesting, and hopefully there will be people out there giving this a try because it sounds like it will really matter for sure. Okay, so that leads me to my last question, which I ask everyone, and that is for our nostalgia playlist on Spotify and Amazon Music. Tell me a song that comes to mind that has happy memories attached to it or kind of a feeling of nostalgia.
The first song that comes to mind for me is "Landslide" by Fleetwood Mac, Stevie Nicks, like,
Yes.
favorite animal within herself, I've always said, and I love that song because it really speaks to so much of the work that I facilitate. I use it in sessions and workshops often because it really talks about the passage of time, transitions, and so much of the work that I do is working with your inner child and connecting to that inner wisdom that our inner child has before all the conditioning happens and all the programming and all the fear and defense mechanisms that are layered on top. When we begin to peel that away, and then you have little you who knows exactly what you need to do, where you need to go, and how to ask for it. And so I just really love that song. It has like a new meaning every time. And yeah.
Love it. I love it. And I love Fleetwood Mac too. So yes, love that choice. Well, Courtney, thank you so much for being here. I really found this fascinating, and that means I know other people will as well. So I hope that they seek you out and they find out more. And I just appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Cheryl. It was great to talk with you.
Absolutely.